freaking first cut. Golly.
What's up, YouTube? It's DFS time for the Scottish Open. We're going tier by tier to break it all down. Hit the like button. Make sure you're subscribed, and we'll start right now. Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. I'm Rick Gehman. That right there, Sia Nejad, and it is time for us to talk DFS. Sia, happy Independence Day, number one, and number two. I guess we gave Greg the day off. It's just you and I today.
That's right. He certainly earned it. So it's just us. Rick, does this feel like a major as we scan this sort of like this DraftKings board? I mean, you got guys in the 8,000s that are just sort of never in the 8,000s, for example, and the 9,000s. This feels like a warm up to the Open, which of course it is. But even from a DraftKings standpoint, it feels like that too.
14 of the top 15 players in the world. The only one we're missing, Rory McIlroy. So yeah, very much a major championship. The pricing reflective of that. We will talk through it. It's also weird because it feels like a major, but because this is a co-sanctioned event, there's like a lot of guys who play primarily on the DP World Tour. So we're doing a lot of data digging. We're doing a lot of comparisons. Those weighted strokes gain metrics, they come in handy this week. It's a full-on effort when it comes to research this time around.
It is, and hopefully some of the people have been paying attention to what's been going on in the World Tour, but or over at the World Tour. But I mean, I'll tell you, there's definitely guys that have been sort of in the back of my mind that have actually bet overseas over the last 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. So I think I've got some guys that are probably going to be relatively popular from sort of that Euro side because their names keep popping. But I'm curious to see where their ownership ends up being at.
Two big announcements off the top before we jump into the course and jump into the player pool. Oh, yes, there it is. If you're watching on YouTube, you have just learned that we've been nominated for the Best Sports Podcast. Wow. In the People's Choice Podcast Awards. So if you would like to vote for us, which we would be greatly appreciative of, all you have to do is go to podcastawards.com/app/sign up. Don't worry, the link is in the description. And then toggle on down to the sports category and click on the First Cut Podcast. The whole thing takes like 60 seconds. As I mentioned, Jacob already took care of it. The link's in the description. He is so on top of this that if you are watching on YouTube, there is literally a QR code that you can scan and get this thing done in about 2 seconds flat. So we are super appreciative, Sia, of the support that we've gotten to this point. It would be nice to make a little run in this thing.
I think it would be great to make a little run in this thing, and I'm super appreciative. I feel very lucky to be a part of the First Cut, not just because they were nominated or we were nominated, but because this is a great cast. This is a great team. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays. I mean, literally every day of the week we bring it, and hopefully that's reflected in people taking the 60 seconds to vote for us.
Yeah, literally daily golf podcast, which I can't imagine there's others.
I don't think, yeah. What's funny, Rick? I never thought of that. I genuinely never thought of that, and that's got to be true.
Is this the only daily should we be touting that? Should that be like our marketing thing? Like 7 days a week of golf? I feel like that should be included somewhere.
I mean, if you're a golf fan, I think this is your one-stop shop because you can do it every single day. And by the way, not only that, but we match. Rick, we match on the show. What other podcast brings you matching light blue shirts, button-up shirts?
Yes, I usually go with the quarter zip on top, but that's okay. We'll work on that. See ya. The other big announcement, the other huge announcement, the fan one and done vote link is now live in the description as well. So go in there, get your vote in Tuesday morning when we record, or we'll actually be live for the mega preview pod. Those one and done selections will lock. So the fans have the same deadline as you and I, Sia. Also, the fans doing much better than you and I. They are now in second behind only Mark. And we stink.
Well, Rick, I did deliver a blow to the fans this last week by picking Webb Simpson, who I believe they were on as well. So,
yeah, so was I.
Well, Rick, hey man, that's on you. I'm just trying to take out the fans. You happen to be caught in the crossfire there, but I'll tell you, I'm doing my part to keep them at bay, and I'll try to figure out who I think they're going to pick this week, so maybe I can take them out 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, just like text me who you're gonna take, or I'll just pick someone that you've already picked. Like I will remove myself from the opportunity of being Sia mushed. I will just pick someone that you have already played. That is honestly the only way to go about surviving this.
And again, I need to apologize again, not to you, Rick, this time, and not to the fans, but to Webb Simpson. Listen, I thought it was a lock for you to make the cut at least and do some damage on the weekend, but I guess this mush thing is like a real thing.
Oh, I guess it is. All right. Well, let's see if we can find some solid DFS options for this week. And Sia, there's a lot to talk about. Jacob, if you could share my screen, that'd be spectacular. Thank you very much. This is my website, RickRunGood.com. This is the course key stats tool. Now, Sia, we have to talk through kind of the logistics of this. The Scottish Open's been around since like the 70s. The Scottish Open has been played at the Renaissance Club, which is where we're going back to each of the last 3 years. But this is the first time that it's a co-sanctioned PGA Tour event. So basically the data that I have, it's like good, not great, right? It's not like the full regression model that I would have run, which usually looks at all the PGA Tour stats. So, I would tread a little carefully with some of the stats that we have, just because of now the difference in this event compared to last couple of years.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think that's a perfectly good disclaimer, and perhaps because of that, we can incorporate a little bit more eye test and a little bit more recent form than we normally do. I mean, normally we're somewhat beholden to just the metrics, but in this case,
Right.
I think we can incorporate some other things in here.
Or at least I am at least beholden to the metrics for sure. You look at the scorecard. It is a par 71. It can be tipped out to like over 7,300. It's 5 par 3s and 4 par 5s, which leaves us with 9 par 4s. And I think it's going to play a little bit longer, Sia, because you got the 5 par 3s that don't, 7,300 yards with 5 par 3s means the other holes, the non-par 3s, are generally fairly long, or at least longer-ish. And then also, as you can imagine, it's time to put on the meteorologist cap, because when we go overseas, like the scoring conditions and the things that we're going to see are so weather dependent.
Yeah, and so that's the one problem about doing a show on Monday when we're anticipating weather, is we're not so close to the weather to know how that's going to shake out. I think if the weather is calm to some degree, then we're looking at a course that is going to be very, very scoreable. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But with all of that said, I mean, I'm definitely, you're talking about the par 3s, but I think the par 5s are going to be really important. So certainly one of the things I'm going to be focused on, is sort of driving distance, getting it out there, but also scoring on those par 5s, I think is going to be very important here, among other things like approach, like we see here on YouTube.
Yeah, the approach play, strokes gained approach is always one of the most correlated stats, but it really jumps off the page at the Renaissance Club. Again, just 3 years worth of data there. Minwoo Lee, our defending champion. Aaron Rai won it in 2020. Bernd Wiesberger won it in 2019. All of them in a playoff. See us. We might be headed towards a playoff this Sunday morning, because, here's the other big announcement. Get your lineups in. Get your picks in. PGA Tour live coverage, which means this event starts 2:30 a.m. Eastern on Thursday. So if you are in the Pacific time zone, that's Wednesday night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's that's kind of sad, right? Like, because we're not. I mean, Rick, what's your game plan there? I mean, when are you waking up? Are we setting alarms here? Like, what's happening?
I don't have a game plan, which is horrible. I should have a game plan by now. I'm going to probably just power through the first night and then get acclimated. That I don't think I'm gonna have a chance to switch my time to sleep in the next couple of days. I think just Wednesday night into Thursday is gonna stink, and then I'll be fine. But then I'll be like that for the next 2 weeks, so it'll be good.
Yeah, that's a good point. You may as well adjust for the next couple of weeks. And
Right.
you listen. Can I ask you a real quick question? Totally
Sure.
off subject.
Obviously.
Last I recall, being in Vegas for July 4th, they don't do big fireworks for July 4th. It's usually like the 30th December, like New Year's Eve. Is that true? Because I'm a little worried about Oliver.
So thank you. First of all, Oliver is so low key. He does not care at all about fireworks, and he does not
Wow.
care at all about the vacuum or anything else like that a lot of dogs care about. There was fireworks last night, just like people shooting them off, and he could not care less. So that's much appreciated though, Sia, but we're good in that department. My understanding is, yeah. So I think for New Year's, they shoot them off the top of the casinos, which is kind of crazy. Like 8 different casinos. Last I heard for tonight, I think there's only one casino shooting them off the roof. I can't remember which one. I don't want to give credit to the wrong place, but I think only one casino is shooting them off tonight.
Gotcha. Well, for those who don't know, New Year's Eve, there's a lot of really cool fireworks to see. It's a good time to be in Vegas.
Yeah, it's crazy. I had one more thought. Oh, the weather does look like it could rain Wednesday and then might be pretty clean Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We'll see, maybe Sunday, but that could create a situation where this is soft. If this is soft, Sia, I mean, Bernd Wiesberger won it in 2022 at 22 under in kind of soft conditions. Minwoo won it last year in kind of soft conditions at 18 under. Aaron Rizier was not as soft. That was 11 under. So we legit could see a 10-shot difference in what the winning score is just based on what the weather report looks like.
Yeah, and if it does happen to be calm, I mean, I definitely think looking at those scoring stats, which you're going to look at anyway, I just think maybe giving extra weight to that, whether it's DK points or birdie or better, or, strokes gained par 5, eagles, birdies, whatever it is. I think that's definitely going to come into play. And that should be the tiebreaker for you when you're discussing, guys like Sam Burns versus, I don't know, whoever's in his, Will Zalatoris, for example.
Okay, well, let's start discussing, guys. We'll look at the cheat sheet. We'll go tier by tier here. We'll figure this thing out. But first, we are going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners. Maybe.
I watch a lot of movies. I know what I'm doing.
What's that thing?
Go big or go home.
I feel like I'm being threatened with a good time. Woo-hoo! I am driving. Oh.
Why are you so handsome?
My dad was a weatherman.
And we're back. Here's the cheat sheet. And Sia, only 4 golfers over $10,000. Scotty Scheffler is $11,200. John Rahm is $11,000. Justin Thomas is $10,600. And Matt Fitzpatrick, yes, Matty Fitzpatty breaks into the $10,000 tier, $10,100. That is well deserved, but still a little bit surprising to see his name up there with the other big boys.
Very surprising. I mean, I get it. I mean, he has good history here as well, not just coming off the win. And the metrics are always pretty good for Fitzpatrick, who certainly can get it out there and kind of checks most of the other boxes. So, yeah, I'm not really interested in Matthew Fitzpatrick, to be honest with you. And it's not because I hate him on this course. Clearly, he's great on this course. But I think I'm more interested of these 4 in Scotty Scheffler and Justin Thomas. Scotty Scheffler, it continues to be a hard argument to make to fade Scotty Scheffler. And I don't think he's going to be super popular in this tournament where you're just going to have to, quote, fade the Scotty Scheffler chalk. That's not going to be the case here. So Scotty, just, in terms of scoring, whether it's on par 5s or just generic DK scoring, he's right there. Approach, he's 3rd in this field last 36 rounds. He does everything. He's got the short game to the extent that comes into play. So Scotty and JT also rates out really well for me in almost everything I looked at. Those are the 2 I'm pretty much focused on.
Here's all you need to know about Scotty Scheffler. He is actually in a slump right now. You would not know that based on his results, but he's actually in a slump right now. He is, over the last 6 starts, a small negative putter. He is about a stroke worse per round with the flat stick than he was from Phoenix to the Masters. So during this slump, a stroke worse per round with the putter, Sia. 2 runner-up finishes, a 13th, a 15th, and an 18th. That's a joke. That is unbelievable how good that is.
It's a total joke, and his ball striking continues to be amazing. And you got to think that, with every sort of slump with the putter with Scotty Scheffler, you can expect a bounce back, not just for 1 tournament, but for like 10 tournaments in a row with him. So I'm going to be a big fan of trotting him out there, not just this week, but next week as well.
Yeah. And speaking of the putter, so here's JT's profile. And for years and years and years, we were like, well, JT's the king of team no putt, and it's just a matter of whether the flat stick's going to keep him in this thing. But he has been so much better. I mean, he has gained strokes with the putter in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of his last 7, 6, 7 of his last like 10 or 11. I mean, he's been. This is a large enough sample size to be really, really excited about the prospects for the next however many years for Justin Thomas.
Yeah, and then if you go out 36 rounds, I mean, he still rates out 24th with the putter in this field, which is really telling. I mean, obviously, these stats sort of tell the story on the ones we're watching on YouTube even better than just a mere ranking. But yeah, he checks every box. Top 10 in approach, top 10 DK points, if you want to look at that. Driving distance, top 10. Opportunities gained, number 2. And by the way, he has a good history here as well. So it's hard to argue against Justin Thomas.
Yeah, so he has the best history at the Renaissance Club, not the Scottish Open, at the Renaissance Club of anybody who's played here twice. So if you're watching on YouTube right now, you see Ryan Palmer, John Rahm, Johannes Veerman, 1, 2, and 3 in terms of strokes gained at the Renaissance Club, but each of them have only played this event once. Justin Thomas has 8 rounds. It's a 9th and a T8. He's gaining 2.25 strokes per round. Other guys who are over 2 strokes per round who have played this at least twice. Minwoo Lee, he has a win and a 30th. Tommy Fleetwood, who has a runner-up and a 26th. And then Eric Van Rooyen, who has a 14th and a T6. So I'm with you, Sia. Very interested to see how the ownership shakes out. But like Scotty's floor seems incredibly high. And Justin Thomas's ceiling, we know, is super high.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, those are, again, depending on your lineup construction. I mean, first of all, it's very easy to include, Scotty Scheffler or Justin Thomas in your lineup. I think a lot of people will be building from that portion down. I mean, I think also a lot of people will be starting in the 9K range because there's so much that's fruitful in the 9K range. For me, especially in that sort of lower end of the 9K range. With all of that said, again, I don't think it's going to be a situation where either of those guys or anybody really in the top 4 are going to be chalky. So I think if you like a guy, go ahead and roster him.
We have to split hairs here at the top. I love John Rahm. He is phenomenal. Lots of the metrics point in his direction. The only thing that worries me, Sia, is this part right here. From the Players Championship to current, he has not been the approach player that we have generally seen for John Rahm over the past couple of years. He lost 6 at the Players, but I think he was on the wrong end of the draw there. He loses 2.5 at the match play. He loses another stroke and a half in Mexico. Even the at the PGA Championship, even the events that he has good results and he's hitting it better, it's not nearly as good as we are used to with John Rahm.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. John Rahm is obviously going to be a pretty good play, but when you measure it against Scotty Scheffler, when you measure it against Matt Fitzpatrick or Justin Thomas, the line of demarcation is pretty clear. Like, it's very clear when we're looking at RickRunGood.com to see like the bright, or I should say the dark green when it comes to Scheffler and Justin Thomas, and then you see a lot of light green with John Rahm. So that doesn't mean he can't pop and win this tournament. And for the record, if he happens to be 8% lower owned than Scotty Scheffler, which I don't think he will be, then I think that's a different conversation. But in terms of if we're just weighing these guys against each other and ownership is the same, it's a definite no for me on John Rahm.
The $9,000 range: Xander, Patrick Cantlay, Colin Morikawa, Will Zalatoris, Sam Burns, Cam Smith, Hideki Matsuyama. That's it. Those are the guys. With a field this deep, Sia, you're getting big names in the 9s and the 8s that we're going to try to take advantage of. Who can we take advantage of here in the $9,000 range?
Yeah, there's so much here. I mean, I think a lot of people are going to pass over Patrick Cantlay. I think he might be just generally lower owned, but I think it'll be pretty flat the rest of the way. I think Xander is interesting. I don't know that people want to pay up for him relative to, let's say, Colin Morikawa on down, because to me, let's start with Will Zalatoris, actually. Will Zalatoris at 9,300, Sam Burns at 9,200, Cameron Smith at 9,100. I really think you could start your lineup there. And for the record, I don't think that's going to be tremendously different. Other people will think of that, but I just think there's so much here in the 9K range that you may as well take the discounts on the guys in the lower end. I mean, I really like Zalatoris, Burns, and Cameron Smith, probably the best if we're talking about the player versus their price.
Yeah, the Zalatoris stuff is crazy. He's just been piling up these top 5 and top 10 finishes basically every single time he tees it up. So he'll certainly be a huge portion of the core. I'm pretty big in on Xander at this point.
Mhm.
You know, even if you just remove the Travelers Championship win, remove the Zurich Classic win, he still gained 11 strokes at the Byron Nelson, over 9 at the PGA, 6.5 at the Memorial, and 8.4 at the US Open in those like 4 consecutive starts. That stretch was bookended by 2 wins. Like he is really, really good right now. Really good. And when you start to look, Sia, at like, last 24 rounds of everybody in this field, Xander's number 1. I like to use 24 rounds. That to me is kind of my default. I think it's long enough without being too long. Very handy that JT Poston going into last week was number 1 in strokes gained over the last 24 rounds. So I'm big in on Xander right now.
First of all, I just love how you said it very explicitly. I think on multiple shows last week. Last 24 rounds, JT Poston is the best in the field, and there were certain qualifiers with that in terms of how he was getting it done. But it is funny because there is a great debate that I think we'll hopefully solve soon in terms of this time of year. Do you want to look at 24? Do you want to look at 36? Do you want to look at 50 rounds or more? And does it depend on the tournament? All of this stuff I think is really interesting. I tend to look at 24 as well. Sometimes I look at 36. Sometimes I look at 50. But with all of that said, listen, I'm not going to argue with you for Xander Schauffele. And this is such a deep tournament that really, truly, if you wanted to, you could target Xander Schauffele and a guy in the 10K range and be absolutely fine filling out the rest of your roster. You'll have to go down to the low 7K range, maybe high 6s at some point when you're doing that roster. But no, I don't have a problem with Xander. And I don't know if you mentioned it, but he also has a top 10 here, finished 10th here last year. So certainly seems to like the course. The recent history is great. The metrics are always good for Xander. So no issue with it whatsoever.
Who's the X factor in this range? Who's the guy maybe a little lower owned, maybe a little overlooked with enough upside to win this thing that you think could kind of break the slate a little bit?
It's interesting because I don't know that other than Cantlay, I don't know that there's going to be anybody that's overlooked. However, if we're talking about a guy that's maybe a little less than some of the really popular guys, I wonder, because I think Sam Burns is going to be popular. I actually really like Sam Burns on this course. I wonder how much ownership Cameron Smith and Hideki Matsuyama are going to get. I really like Cameron Smith as well. I actually, one of the first lineups I did, and I filled out a handful. I actually started with Zalatoris, Sam Burns, and Cameron Smith. It left me, for the record, 7,467. So which is plenty, by the way, especially if you're willing to dip down into the 6K range. But I really think this is a perfect course, a perfect setup for Cameron Smith.
Cam Smith is number 1 in this field, last 24 in strokes gained approach. He's just not putting well, which is usually not something that stays away from Cam Smith for very long. Right?
That's right. Go ahead.
He will find that flat stick eventually, and when he does, he's probably going to win. And I want to be involved in it when he finds it.
Yeah, and the thing about the putter too with Cameron Smith is like you said, that's coming around, and hopefully, I'm hoping that his ownership is just a touch down than where it should be because of the recent results, which the putter has contributed to. We know when he pops with the putter, if he's marrying a good putter with a good approach play, he's absolutely top 5ing this thing. So I'm hoping that when we see ownership, and again, for all of you listening, be really careful how long you wait for ownership and how long you wait to submit your laps, because again, this tournament starts at a much earlier time than normal. But with all of that said, I'm really hopeful that Sam Burns, for example, Will Zalatoris, maybe Morikawa, maybe Xander suck up so much ownership that you have a Cameron Smith that is maybe, 5 or 6% lower than some of those guys.
I want to get down to the 8Ks. And then the 7s and find some value in the 6s. And we're going to do just that. But first, we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners. And we're back. Let me address a question from Tom Maroney that says, I thought JT withdrew. So I'm assuming Tom thinks this, Sia, because JT still has that red designation on DraftKings, which I think it says out, or now it might say questionable, where they're always late on that. That is from JT's last tournament that he withdrew from the Travelers before it started. That designation has carried over. He is very much in this event.
Yeah, I wonder why DraftKings does that, because it's not like it's an oversight. They know what they're doing. And it's just weird to me. Like, I guess if you want to compare it to football, I mean, I guess if you carry a questionable tag one week, you're probably going to be questionable the next week, but it's very confusing. You may as well take it off and then apply it later.
It is like 100% just the way their database is built. And they must get their injury designations from some other source. And that source is probably like, oh yeah, we don't update until like Tuesday of tournament week or something like that. And it just lingers there. Like, I guarantee it is like 100% a third party that it's not worth them making a fuss over and rebuilding everything for Thursday.
Yeah, and for the record, I'm in Justin Thomas's case, people are going to kind of know, by tonight that he's actually playing and he's fine. But there are circumstances where there's like a lower end guy that has that tag, and therefore like nobody's paying attention to him. And those are times to maybe pounce on that guy, particularly if you like him, because the ownership actually might be lower because people, when they're doing lineups early, are completely dismissing that person.
The $8,000 range. Myron is all over this. There's a comment from Myron here that says Ryan Fox can be sneaky, but will he show up against the big dogs? Well, Ryan Fox is in the $8,000 range, Sia. And let's just start there because this is a very good question. Ryan Fox is a very talented DP World Tour regular who in his last 8 DP World Tour events, he has 8 top 8s. Which is fairly good from what I understand about golf. I don't even want to say it's a concern. The other thing to consider is that he's played 2 major championships during that stretch. A 54th at the PGA, where he gained 5.5 strokes on approach, and he missed the cut at the US Open. So we now need to reconcile 8 top 8s in a row on the European side of things with a 54th and a missed cut at our last 2 major championships.
Yeah, and I think that's why, for me, I'm not going to be on Ryan Fox. And it's not just that. It's when you contrast that with his price. Well, I shouldn't say contrast, when you compare it to his price. Because I understand how good Ryan Fox has been. These finishing positions are amazing. But I still thought he'd be like 7,700 or 7,800.
This is by far the most expensive he's ever been. Previously, he was $7,100 at a WGC event in 2018. That's the most expensive he's ever been on a PGA Tour slate until right now. So $1,400 more expensive.
So he's in a weird spot because everybody sort of knows what Ryan Fox is, or most people know what Ryan Fox is doing at this point. So he's going to pick up, I guess, some ownership there. But I also think that the reverse is true too, because you look at Ryan Fox next to like Joaquin Niemann, for example, Sung J M. Even if you go down to like Cameron Young, Corey Connors, maybe Tommy Fleetwood, like I don't think like the standard regular DFS player is going to want to play Ryan Fox. But again, I'm making the point that he'll have enough ownership because of how good he's done that I don't think I'm going to be on him because he's going to be super low owned. So he's just in this weird spot where I just don't think I'm going to play him at all.
It's a bizarre, it's a very unique situation. We don't get a lot of very unique situations like this where I think he's both simultaneously a good play and too expensive, which is always kind of a weird spot to be in. Who else in this 8K range has your full attention?
Yeah, I mean, okay, first of all, there's going to be a very popular, 2 popular guys probably, but one in particular, and I'm waiting for you to identify him on YouTube. Do you have there it is. Okay. Your guy, Victor Hovland at 8,800. I made reference to this at the beginning of the show. That's staggering. I don't really know how to reconcile that. I think as I look at the 9K range, I don't know that he should be in the 8K range. I think he should be firmly up there near Colin Morikawa at like 9,300, 9,200. What is this price? And is he going to be just super popular? How can you resist Victor Hovland at 8,800?
Yeah, this is the cheapest he's been, I think, since the 2021. It's been a while. It's been over a year since Victor Hovland has been in the $8,000 range. And I mean, listen, it's not like he's played super well, right? He missed the cut at the US Open. He finished T51 at the Memorial. Those are both well below what his own expectations would be. He's had the time off, right? Went back to Norway, hopefully got everything all figured out, and now he makes kind of a sprint to the finish line here. I love a guy with upside. And he's won 6 times in 85 events. And that is even with the deficiency that everyone always wants to point out around the green. I have no problem paying. Like I just in general have no problem buying high upside win equity golfers at their all-time low.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like this is a Matthew Wolff situation. Let's go back to March. And if you asked me, is Victor Hovland going to mirror the ball striking from March through, I don't know, April or May, or is he going to mirror the ball striking between, let's say, June and July or whatever? I would defer to what I know Victor Hovland to be. And I don't think around the green game is going to be super critical here. I don't think it's going to be super arduous for Hovland. So I just think this is a perfect time to play him. I just wonder, and I'm not looking at any sort of preliminary ownership. I just wonder if everybody is thinking the same thing we are. 8,800 just seems like such a bargain. But then again, Sungjae, Neiman, Spieth, you can go down and just take Cameron Young at 8,100, who, for the record, I like it. And I'll just finish answering your question. So, yeah, I love Hovland. I also like Jordan Spieth. I think it's a good setup for him. I like Max Homa, and I like Cameron Young.
So Victor Hovland has not cracked the 20% ownership since Phoenix. He was 12, 12, 12, 10, 11, 12, 17, 16, 6. So I think we are in store for a 9 to 12% owned Victor Hovland.
Yeah, so it's just weird though, because a couple of those tournaments that, again, we can see it here on RickRunGood.com on YouTube. Most of those tournaments, he's in the 9 and 10K range. Right. So it's like now it's the first time that people get to roster Victor Hovland in the 8K range. I just don't think people will be able to resist that. And I get it. Like, I don't know that I'll be able to resist it. And therefore, if he's really popular, if it turns out that that's going to be the case, then in the bigger tournaments, I'll probably end up fading him. But yeah, I mean, he's the headliner of that 8K group.
You might be right. Maybe people just look at it and won't be able to resist. The stat profile from Max Homa is about as good as it gets. I mean, he is one of the best ball strikers going back, whatever you want to look at, 24, 30, 45, 50. Ball striking numbers are there. He's much better around the green now. His putter, it can go in both directions, but he's generally quite positive with it. This is a dream come true stat profile for $8,000.
It's amazing to me that at the US Open, he lost 6 strokes putting and still finished in the top 50. Yeah. Like, that is very difficult to do. It's really amazing. So my point there is, a bad day for Max Homa, he still cruises through the cut and potentially, cracks the top 50, top 40, top 30, which of course we're looking for more from Max Homa here. But listen, he's a flat 8K. The initial model that I've run, he's number 2 in the model. Maybe my model's screwed up, but I absolutely love that. I mean, he rates out so well on approach in any sort of scoring stat you want to emphasize. Putting, he's great. He's top 10 last 36 rounds. There's really very little by his strokes gained par 5. He's way up there in the top 10. There's not an argument to be made against him other than, hey, listen, is he going to be really popular? I wonder the same thing about Cameron Young in terms of his popularity. Homa is definitely going to be more popular. And if he is, then I'll maybe consider a pivot. But Homa, the value on that is tremendous.
Before we move on, David wants to know about Tommy Fleetwood. Is he back? So here's Tommy Ladd's stat profile. See anything good here?
Not really. I mean, the short game's great. The ball striking isn't there. I mean, I'm not even sure this is the tournament for him in terms of like how this sets up for him. And obviously he historically has been good on approach, but I don't see it unless he's really low owned. Then I think he's an interesting pivot. But knowing Tommy Fleetwood, he's never really low owned, especially overseas. He has a decent history here. I'm not interested personally. Over 4 days, I'm not interested. Maybe in a showdown, I would be.
Yeah, the runner-up finished in 2020, the 26th last year. I'm lukewarm, like a 6 out of 10 on Tommy. If 5 is average. Okay, let's jump on down to the $7,000 range here. We got a couple of veterans at the top in Justin Rose, Keegan Bradley, Keith Mitchell, Terrell Hatton. It goes down to a couple of Molinari brothers are both $7,000. How about that? Henrik Stenson in the field. What do we do here in the 7th, Sia?
Yeah, this is where I think this is where you could kind of win or lose your tournament. The reason I say that is because I think the way people are going to build, whether you're building with a lot of 9K guys or you're going 10K, 9K, 8K, I think you're going to end up with a couple of 7K guys in your lineup. And I think it's actually, to me, it's very difficult to determine who stands out over some of these other guys in the range. The guys that I sort of located, I think Mito Pereira is interesting. I know he hasn't been great lately. With that said, I love how he fights back from bad starts.
Also, like his hasn't been great lately, which I don't disagree. The two missed cuts are gaining nearly a stroke on the field at the US Open and missing the cut, and then losing 0.08 at the Travelers Championship. He's gained strokes in total over his last two starts and hasn't made a weekend. That's a pretty good way to miss a cut.
It's such a heartbreaker for me, Rick. You know, I shared a text with you during the Travelers where I really needed Mito to make the cut, and I had like some serious outright potential. And he started, round one and this is what I love about him. His round ones have not been good as of late, and he's battled back. I love the moxie and just sort of the wherewithal he has to be a young golfer and to come back from things like that. And at the Travelers, he was, I believe, like 6 under at a certain point, and then he bogeyed 3 out of his last his 5 holes there. I still think he's a great value. I wonder if the shine is off him enough where he's not going to be super popular, but I'm sure he'll pick up some ownership. Some guys that'll be a little less rostered that I kind of like. I think Jonathan Vegas is interesting. I think it's a good course setup for him. He can certainly get it out there. He can get hot sometimes with the putter and on approach. Meronk, I think, is really interesting. His profile in terms of finishing positions, Adrian Meronk, has been really good. If we just look since March, 3rd, 98th, 6th, 3rd, 74th, and then at the Irish Open last week, a first place finish. So I think he is a guy that I don't think people are going to be sleeping on necessarily, but I don't think he'll be super highly owned because people aren't paying attention to the World Tour too much.
Okay, what do we do with Lucas Herbert here? Because or I guess what is the industry going to do with him? Because he's got back-to-back 4th place finishes, and then he had a top 10 last week at the Irish Open. Now, I don't know how, as you mentioned, like how in tune people are with that. Like, what's the ownership for Lucas Herbert going to look like? Because I could be, if he's like 9% owned, I'm all the way in. If he's like 19% owned, I'm all the way out because he is super reliant on the short game. I worry about some of these advanced metrics, but if they're going to give me a guy who's coming off a top 10 with back-to-back 4ths here, I'm going to take it.
Yeah, I hear you. But the only thing I'm seeing from him is pops with the putter. So, I mean, I get the course history argument, but I think there's some times where I'm happy to mirror, like I'm happy to be, I'll just look at course history I'll disregard recent form. I think in Lucas Herbert's case, especially with, what appears to be an influx of talent, Rick, I don't know what the talent profile is in terms of the rating this year versus, let's say, the last 2 years, but I would imagine that guys like Lucas Herbert are up against way better competition than they have been the last few years.
Yeah, so we don't have the strength of field yet, but it's going to be big. I mean, and the Scottish Open is generally pretty decent. Last year's was 400, which, to put that into perspective, a 400 on the PGA Tour, I'll tell you this in a second. It's like the Travelers Championship. It's like winning the Travelers, where Xander won. So it's decent. I think we're going to crush that. I think we're going to get, when you have 14 of the top 15 players in the world, you start getting into major championship, WGC type areas. I think we're going to get, 600, something like that.
Yeah, that wouldn't shock me at all. So yeah, I like Meronk quite a bit. A couple other names I'll mention that I think are interesting and likely to be lower owned. Harris English, Patrick Rogers, and Eric Van Rooyen. The really interesting thing about Van Rooyen is he's been really bad, basically, I think this entire year. But
that is interesting.
That is interesting. But here's the more interesting part. If you recall last year, he was also bad until this time of year, until it was time to qualify for the FedEx Cup, where he finished, I guess it started in July or August, where he finished 1st, 37th, 7th, 5th, and 22nd. So yeah. I'm not suggesting he's able to like turn it on and off like the Showtime Lakers, but I am suggesting that he might just be one of those guys that hones in sort of into his craft later in the season. And he does have good history here. I think he's a really interesting contrarian play because nobody's going to look at his stat profile and say, hey, I'm going to roster EVR.
$6,000 range. Let's find some value here. Sia, these are kind of struggling PGA Tour vets plus a bunch of guys who reside primarily on the DP World Tour. What do we do?
I'll just list off a few names I like. I think Matthew Naismith is definitely coming into his own. He might have met his match from a talent standpoint here, but I still think at 6,900, he's okay. Zanotti is really interesting. He's been a top 40 machine over on the World Tour. He almost won the Irish Open last week. He was one shot off going into Sunday. I think it's a great price on him. I'll continue to mention Anirban Lahiri, who I think has the talent to be okay here. John Caitlin, a top 25 machine on the World Tour. He was fourth at the Irish Open last week. I think Wyndham Clark is interesting. And then as far as flyers, I'll mention Clark, Callum Tarrant, and Sami Valimaki. I think those are interesting upside guys that you can throw into your lineup and maybe win a big tournament with.
Two more. If you're freaky and you want to get into Patty Harrington, he's coming off the win at the U.S. Senior Open Championship and has 2 straight top 20s here at the Renaissance Club. Audrey Arnis, who I'll have to pull up his stats from all over the world, but he's finding himself in the mix more often than not. 3rd in Saudi Arabia, 9th, 8th, runner-up. He's not played as well in super recent stuff, but I still think he's worth a flyer. It's kind of interesting, right? These guys that play so often on the DP World Tour, getting an influx of PGA players, and now it's co-sanctioned, but it's still going to feel like home. Like, I'm interested to see how they shake this whole thing out.
Yeah, I totally agree. Some of the names I mentioned, like Zanatti, Caitlin, I'm really interested to see how they measure up to some of the guys that, are household names now on the PGA Tour, like a Mito Pereira, for example, or even a Patrick Rogers. How do they measure up to a Patrick Rogers, who is kind of one of those guys that, he's good sometimes, he's not great other times.
Hit me with them narrative lineups, Jacob. Let's see what we got here. Okay.
Oh, wow.
What are we dealing with here, Sia?
Okay, so this is a lot. I love the imaging. Okay, so I'll do mine first. I wanted to do a Braveheart lineup. So again, always drop the hashtag Strokes Narrative. Now, Braveheart, I think, was released in 1995. So Rick, have you seen Braveheart?
I have seen Braveheart.
Okay,
Braveheart is the aim small, miss small one, right?
I don't remember
with what's the guy? Not Bruce Willis. Is it Bruce? Who's the guy?
Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson. Okay. Yeah. Aim small, miss small. Doesn't he teach his kids how to shoot, or is this completely different movie that I'm describing?
I think it might be a different movie. I'll let the listeners let us know.
Wait, isn't Braveheart Hold the Line? Is he like Hold the Line? Is that not Braveheart?
I don't
Have
know.
you seen Braveheart?
I'm thinking of Freedom and Mel Gibson yelling. It's been a while. It's been about 20 years.
nailing Braveheart, and you haven't. All right.
Here I was about to mock you for being too young for Braveheart. Okay, so William Matt Wallace, obviously William Wallace, King Eduardo Molinari, Longshanks, Robert the Bruce McIntyre. That's a character in the movie Robert the Bruce. Cameron Smythe.
Nice.
Smythe is a character in the movie. Cameron Smith. Stephen Yeager of Ireland, and another Will Wallace reference here. William Zalatoris Wallace, 3,500 to spare for porridge and deep fried Mars bars.
Myron Kidd says that's the Patriot. Am I thinking of the Patriot, or am I thinking of Braveheart? I Patriot, actually.
Think you might be thinking of the Patriot, but I could be wrong.
Embarrassing.
I could be wrong.
All right. While I figure that out, the Model Maniac, his strokes gained narrative lineup. What's the trend here?
So haggis is the food. So I think these are just like food oriented things out in Scotland.
Nacho Elvira. Who is that?
That's a good question.
Stephen Brown Sugar. Who is that?
Stephen
Sean
Yeager?
Crockpot is Sean Crocker, I think.
Oh, hey, by the way, Nacho Elvira is actually a guy in the field.
Like straight up, that's his name?
Yeah, that's his name. At 6,200.
Model Maniac. I love you, brother. I don't get these. All right. Brent Harris went with Scottish Open, things Scotland is famous for. Scotchy Scheffler, Chris Kilt, Loch List, like the Loch Ness Monster, Haggis English, which would be Harris English, Haltong Links Golf, and Rafa Cabrera Bayo the Bagpipes.
I think that's a great lineup. I think that might be the best one. I think we got two more that I can do for you real quick. We got the king right here, John Markowski, who keeps using his notes tab, his notes app to submit lineups. No problem there. Scottish Open established in 1972. That's his birth year. Others celebrating 50th birthdays this year. Cameron Diaz Young turns 50 this year. Sungjae Eminem. That's fantastic. Eminem turns 50 this year. RC Ben Affleck. Harold Ben's ex Jennifer Varner. Brandon, all I want for Christmas is Woo. Mariah Carey shout out. And Alex Biggie Smalley Biggie Smalls would have turned 50 today, apparently. So, Rick, you want to do this last one from Fade My Plays?
Yeah, Fade My Plays here. So, Scotch Whiskey. So he's going with Macallan Tarrant, Joachim Lagavulin, Ryan Fox Fitzgerald, Johnny Walker Vegas, Sam Aaron Robert Burns, Adrian Moronki Shoulder. And he left $5,000 on the table. Okay, I figured out this movie situation. This is confusing. So Mel Gibson plays two different. Okay, so he's in The Patriot, which is the movie I'm thinking of, which is from 2000. Mel Gibson plays Benjamin Martin. And then he plays William Wallace, Scottish warrior, in Braveheart.
All right. So thanks for confusing me and making me feel like I didn't watch the movie. I appreciate that.
I haven't seen Braveheart in a long time.
Speaking of apologies, I do want to apologize to Nacho Elvira for not knowing he existed, and to John Catlin for pronouncing his name wrong. I was saying Caitlin because that's how it looks phonetically, but it is in fact Catlin.
John Catlin's an American who plays on the DP World Tour, actually, which is kind of rare. Multiple, and he's won like 4 times over there. Nacho is a common nickname for Ignacio, I believe.
I mean, you're dropping knowledge that I have. Okay, I'll take your word for it on that one.
Anything else before we get out of here?
No, I think I got all my apologies out of the way. So I think that's it for me, Rick.
The end of every show, narrative lineups and all the things we screwed up.
That's good. Accountability. We got this.
All right. Tuesday's mega preview pod, Wednesday betting preview, round by round recaps a little bit earlier because of the time difference. Again, get your lineups in, get your picks in. This thing's going hot. Very in the wee hours of Wednesday evening into Thursday morning, depending on where you live. So get your stuff in. For now, big thanks to producer Jacob, does all the hard work behind the scenes. Sia Nejad available on Twitter at Sia Nejad. You can find me at RickRunGood. This has been The First Cut. We'll catch you next time.